So even though he kind of still had to work for a living with numbers instead of working in a factory, he was still kind of working class, but also kind of middle class as well, kind of in the middle, which is kind of perfect for me. It makes it interesting to research. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. All the best in your future career. I hope it goes well for you. Thank you so much. Madam Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, now we have an interesting... Sorry.
Oh, sorry, I thought you wanted me to make a speech. So I'll sit down
So,
again.
yeah, I have that effect on ladies. don't leave yet, please. Right, we're coming to another chap who I think deserves a lot of recognition. That is Charles Welsh, who's proprietor of the Royal Hotel, and he provided the facilities, sporting facilities, for the Crewe Alexandra Cricket Club, the Athletics Club. The stadiums he built were absolutely fantastic. So I'll let you know his great-grandson, Peter Welsh, carry on the conversation now. Peter Welsh, everybody.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. I have to say it's a great pleasure to be invited to speak. As Ernie says, I'm Charles Welch's great-grandson, and he's received a lot of credit, I think, for helping develop the cricket club and form the football club in 1877. I'm also very pleased to have my cousin Roger here, and also Eddie Shaw and his brother-in-law Ryan, and my son Charlie, who was christened Charles, who was Charles Welch's great-great-grandson. I think just to start, I think the most important sporting event of 1866 was not actually the formation of the Crewe Alexandra Cricket Club. It was actually, and it is quite relevant in this year of great triumph for our British team in Rio, it was actually the formation of the National Olympic Association, which was a British association. And the very first games actually took place at Crystal Palace in August of 1866. And the relevance, I think, to tonight is that the winner of the 440 yards hurdles was W.G. Grace. And he won it in a time of 70 seconds. If I tell you that the current world record is 46.78 seconds, you can guess there's been a bit of progress since then. But incredibly, he'd a few days earlier scored 224 not out for England at the Oval, and then he went to Crystal Palace, as I said, and won the very first running of not the World Olympics, but certainly the British Olympics, of the 440 hurdles. And of course, as many of you know, he did actually come and play at the Valley Ground in 1874. So I'm here to talk about my grandfather. I'm going to be quite brief. He was very much a child of the Victorian age, and I think he very much fits the mould of that time. Crewe clearly was developing very fast. It had the great advantage of being a railway junction linking Manchester to Liverpool in the south. So of course, there was an awful lot going on, and he was the sort of guy, I think, who, when he saw a lot going on, he wanted to get involved. Our family were originally from Nantwich, and had been in Nantwich for many years. My great-great-grandfather was a coach builder, and I think probably quite a lot before that were wheelwrights and coach builders and whatever, and probably farmers prior to that. He's been dead 120 years, and so I'm very much going on what I know from what I've read. No one who is now alive ever knew him, although my aunt has given me a few anecdotes about him. He had 3 wives. Very sadly, 2 of those wives died, and he managed to have 9 children. At various times, he was the deputy mayor of the town. He was a member of the county council from its formation. He was, I believe, although I need to confirm this with Liam, but I think he was president of the Alexandra Athletic Club, secretary of the Cheshire, Shropshire and Staffordshire coursing clubs, And apparently the Waterloo Cup was an unmissable event for him, which he did. He was educated, which again in 1866 was a bit of a privilege. I have got a letter from him written to his mother, which was actually written in 1851, saying, "I found, as you said, my clothes bag and dictionary, but to my great disappointment you did not send my Latin grammar." Now, all I can say is that when I was at school, I remember I used to have a gerbil at school, and I used to let it loose in my desk to see if it would eat my Latin grammar. But he clearly was slightly more concerned about having his Latin grammar. So he apparently started life as a grocer in Nantwich, but he quickly moved to Crewe because, as I say, I think he saw the opportunities there. And he met Thomas Abraham, but I think he probably met him some time after the Alexandra Cricket Club was formed, and it seems probably 1876. And he bought some land close to the station, and I think he was desperate to see any sort of sporting activity to be supported. And as I understand it, he offered to build a stadium from where the Alexandra Cricket, Athletic, Football and Bicycle Club operated. By this time he also owned the Royal Hotel, and that was run also by my grandfather up until the late 1940s. Some things about him, I do generally think he was a man of the people, and I think that he genuinely wanted to help and develop all aspects of the town for everyone. And I think, there's one thing that he did a lot of work on was the park, in the Queen's Park, and there is a nice plug there just to commemorate the efforts he made there. But I think he genuinely wanted to do things for everybody. He was a liberal. I think that means in those days meant it was a lot different from the Liberal Party of Tim Farron, and he definitely believed in a meritocracy. The only issue I think with the Liberals is there was quite a large part of the Liberal Party in those days that were very keen on temperance, or rather not drinking, and certainly as a hotelier he was very keen for everyone to be able to have a drink at any time they liked. He loved his sport. I think, as I say, the Waterloo Cup was his big thing. If I'm absolutely honest, and I need to be careful what I say here, being amongst cricketers, but I don't think cricket was necessarily his number one love. I read that he did enjoy a Saturday afternoon down at the cricket club watching a game, and he did enjoy a game of bowls as well, after church on Sundays apparently. But I think he was a football man at heart, and I know certainly my grandfather, who was chairman of the Crewe Alexandra Football Club for about 30 years, I believe, was definitely a football man. He very much believed in professionalism, and he was very keen to see people develop in whatever way they could and do the very best that they could. There is a note in his obituary which I particularly liked, where it says that when he was at council meetings, he very seldom said anything, but when he did, it always came at an opportune moment, and it carried great weight. And when I read that, I just thought, how I wish that applied to me. But I really did think that was a great compliment to him, and it also said he had marvellous tact. Loyalty, I think, again, being a Victorian boy, his four boys all went to the grammar school in Sandbach, and the headmaster, when he left to go and run the Sevenoaks school down in Kent, he actually sent all four of his boys with him, and I thought that showed great loyalty to the man. And another thing I think that was a very nice thing that I read, that my aunt actually told me about, was that when he died at 55, poor chap, so he was very young, and I guess that a good dose of antibiotics these days would have saved him, but sadly in those days they didn't exist. But as he was on his deathbed for, I think it took him about a week to die, in the Royal Hotel, the people basically put straw out on the cobbles outside the hotel so that he wouldn't get disturbed, and I thought that was a great mark of respect for him. So what was his legacy? Well, he did have, as I say, had 9 children. The ones that I know most about are his 4 boys he had with his 3rd wife. My grandfather, who was also Charles, he, as I say, he ran the Royal Hotel until the late 1940s, and I think he was held in great esteem by the people of Crewe. I certainly am led to believe that. And he was, as I say, chairman of the football club for many, many years, and the thing I do know, he spent a lot of money trying to develop the football club. It did cost him quite a lot of money, but I think he thoroughly enjoyed it. My great uncle Wilmot was he formed the first scout troop in the town, and Gerald Newbrook, who's here, knows all about my uncle Wilmot because he's written a book about him. He served in the Cheshire Artillery on the Western Front and in Palestine, and was mentioned in dispatches, so he had a good war. He was all round very good bloke, I understand. We then get on to my uncle Alan, who was Roger's grandfather. He amazingly survived, I think, over 3 years on the Western Front, which I think is really quite an achievement. Was awarded the Military Cross and was mentioned in dispatches, and then went on to be a very successful accountant, which seems like a sort of quite a contrast compared to being on the Western Front. And my uncle Douglas, who was his fourth son, he was the youngest, he was very handsome, he was a real playboy, and surprise, surprise, he joined the Royal Flying Corps. He had a near fatal crash, I think quite early on, which probably saved his life, and then he spent the rest of his life skiing in Switzerland, lucky bloke. I sort of think, you know, all of our families, occasionally through the generations, throw up someone with the X factor. Now, if I look at our family, I think my great-grandfather Charles was just one of those guys. He really was someone who he wanted to get things done, and I think he was. I think he did. He really made the most of his 55 years on the planet. So I'd just like to say thank you all very much for listening, and I'd particularly like to thank Ernie for organising tonight, and thank you for your attention.
Well, that, ladies and gentlemen, fantastic speech. Thank you so much. There we are. So I think.